Amazing insights from Greg, right? Especially about job creation by startups. What was it? 87% of startups will be hiring, which is great. And you keep hearing about there are no jobs, right? So here we are creating jobs in the Silicon Valley and setting the trend for the whole country, for the whole world. So the next thing on the agenda is funding. So what kind of options are there for you as entrepreneurs? Should you go for incubators, angel funding, VC funding, debt, equity? There's so many options. How do you narrow that funnel? So for the next hour, we'll have 2 fireside chats for 15 minutes each. We'll have a panel discussion for half an hour. We'll be touching upon these themes. So there should be a lot of interesting takeaways for you guys. We have exciting speakers coming up. We'll be talking about all these different funding topics. So make sure that you stick around, and don't forget to tweet any comments using the hashtags being projected on the screen. With that, I'd like to invite our speakers for the next session. Our incubator is right for you. We have Muddu Sudhakar, who is a seasoned entrepreneur and runs big data and analytics at VMware. And then the speaker for today is Ravi Belani, who teaches entrepreneurship at Stanford. He worked at DFJ for 6 years, and he runs the Alchemist Accelerator. A big hand for the speakers, ladies and gentlemen.
All right, good morning everybody. Let's get started. So we have only 15 minutes, and the agenda seems to be that there will be a bunch of questions I have that I'll be asking Ravi, but if you guys have more questions, probably talk to Ravi offline, talk to Suman. So I think the first question I want to get started, the crux of every entrepreneur. One of the key questions that I over a period of many years is, and also people talk to me is, what's the best route to investment, Ravi? Right?
Yes.
And is it an incubation is the right approach? Is it the seed funding, classical VC route? What's the trade-offs, pros and cons? Touch upon that.
Okay, so we'll touch, that's a broad topic that we can go into in a lot of different details. I'm going to try to touch upon it really succinctly here. And if you guys have any questions afterwards, you can just look me up on my LinkedIn profile has my email address. It's Ravi Belani, B-E-L-A-N-I, or you can go to Alchemist Accelerator and check that out. Let me give you some context though so you understand my biases when I answer this question. So the Alchemist Accelerator is a venture-backed accelerator. We are backed by Khosla Ventures, Draper Fisher Jurvetson, US Venture Partners, Cisco, and SAP. So we are an accelerator that is backed by the venture community, similar to, and people don't really know this, but Y Combinator, which is also an accelerator, was backed by Sequoia for the preponderance of their capital when they were starting out as well. When you look at funding sources, across the spectrum that of angel investing to seed funds to venture capitalists, there's some classic trade-offs, and in general, you're going to need all funding sources depending upon your stage, and they're all generally sweet spots for different stages. So, the classic trade-offs. By the way, the timer's not working. The 15 minutes, if anybody's minding that. The classic trade-offs when you're raising capital are, the way that I like to raise capital is that I think there's a distinction between when you're raising your first 250 to 750 versus when you're raising an institutional VC round. And the first thing to really get clear on to answer that question is what your interests are. Because when you take on an investor who takes on a board seat, you cannot divorce that investor. So, if you hire an employee, you can fire an employee. If you find a co-founder, and I hope this never happens, but you can divorce your co-founder. You cannot divorce an institutional investor that comes into your company, especially on your board, unless you get another investor. So you want to be pretty careful about who you get in bed with on the investing side. Having said that, when the classic categories are angels, funds, which split between seeds and VCs, and then there's incubators and accelerators. Angels, the pros and cons of each, just really quickly, are angels. The pros is that they can make a quick decision, and the cons are that it can be a lot of work to get a relatively small check, a 25 to 100K check, and they don't have capital reserved for follow-on investing if you need it later, and they might be difficult to manage. So you might have to manage angels who become more of a nuisance than they are helpful. But the huge asset that angels have is that, one, they can be your initial investors. Two, you want to really prioritize the guys that you would want to meet with anyways, the people who would be advisors to the company normally. If you can get them to invest, you will get more out of them as an advisor if they're an investor. And it doesn't waste your time because those are meetings you would want to take anyways. And then they can catalyze the other funding sources to come in. So angel investors that's the pros and cons of angel investors. Institutional investors, VCs, their sweet spot is typically a $3 to $5 million check, and it really is a function of the VC size. But if you segment between traditional VCs and seed funds, the traditional VCs are really looking to write $3 to $5 million checks. They do have programs where they can write smaller checks, and we might discuss that later. The problem with taking a smaller check from a VC early on is that you create signaling risk when you want to raise that Series A, when you want to raise that later round. What that means is that if you take a $100,000 or $200,000 check from an institutional VC, and they don't have enough ownership, the ownership that they need to make their economics work, when you raise that money, when you raise the big round later, those VCs are going to, any other VC is going to ask, what is your seed VC doing in that round? If they wrote a $100,000 check, what are they doing for the Series A round? And there's no good answer to that, because either if they're not investing, then it's either because they didn't like you or you didn't like them. Either way, it's bad. And if they are thinking about investing, then that VC is probably not going to dedicate the time to issue you a term sheet because they already have an inside advantage. So if you're taking VC money, if you're not taking where their sweet spot is, which is the $3 to $5 million check, it creates these trade-offs later on down the road. But the advantage of obviously having a VC for a $3 to $5 million round or a big round is that you have a partner around the table who can help drive a lot of value and who can reserve capital for follow-on financing. Seed funds are designed typically to write $250 to up to maybe $2 million checks, and they really aren't designed for the $3 to $5 million round, so they don't create that signaling issue. Nobody's going to ask, why is that seed fund not doing the Series A? Because they're not designed to. But they typically will want to take more ownership in your company than a regular VC, because that's the only round that they're participating in. So but they're designed for you at that stage. And accelerators or incubators, why do we exist? We exist to help you, one, navigate this, but also to create, people will do accelerators for a variety of reasons, but what an accelerator is it's really a program before you raise institutional money. It's a structured program and that typically is aiming to drive fundraising, to get all the VCs to corral around, to jockey, to bid on you, and to help drive your development and your mentorship, and also to create a community or a network. And so they're typically 3 to 6 month programs that allow you to drive towards typically a seed or Series A institutional event at the end of those programs. When you're fundraising, this can be very confusing, and my general guidance is to pursue all channels until you have options. So, list out, in our experience, it takes 60 investor meetings to raise your first $1 million. That's for a company that that's pre-revenue, where it's based on the team and the market. It generally takes around 60 meetings. So you should be ready to have a pipeline of 60 meetings. And the way that we like to approach this is to prioritize your, whatever the active number of meetings you think you can handle a week are, which might be like 12 meetings a week, and to segment those meetings between the different types, between angel investors, seed funds, traditional funds, strategic investors, as Greg was talking about, and then every week go after a mix of types, because your story might resonate with some but not others, and then when one drops out, add another one to the pipeline until you're just driving a process like a Zen process. So, and then when you have decisions or when you have multiple offers, then you can make a decision about who you want. That's a very broad answer, and we can go into each of those for another hour. So I'm going to go back to Muddu.
No, it's good. But just to make it, given that we have in the 7 minutes,
Yeah.
I'll make it a series of questions and
Okay.
keep answers short.
We'll go.
So I think I was very well said so far what you have described. Is there a sudden increase in the accelerators or these incubator models? What's the trend? Why is it happening suddenly now in the last 3 years?
Yeah.
And there's also a trend from an entrepreneur side these days, given the way in which you want to create a company with startups, particularly in the software side.
Yeah.
And given the cloud resources that are available, you can do a pretty good startup, pre-beta, pre-product revenue with less than $2 million. So taking those things, give me an idea as to why there's a trend in incubators, and given that there's a $2 million, is the incubators can support up to $2 million investment?
Okay. Well, you answered your own question almost. The reason why there's so many accelerators is because the cost of starting a company has gone down so dramatically. So it is Moore's law applies to entrepreneurs as well. Literally, $50,000 today is the equivalent of $5 million 10 years ago in terms of what you can do. Everything's a service, so all the hardcore infrastructure that you used to need to get access to is easily accessible. There's a whole bunch of drivers where you can build significant companies with very little capital, which is why you're having the evolution of the accelerator, which is for small checks, what's becoming more important is not the money, the initial money, but it's all the resources to build your company beyond the capital, which are typically product and customer development, and also talent and mentors, and then jockeying to get that big check because there's so many other competitors out there. So the virtue of the fact that you can do so much more with so little is that you can build bigger companies quicker than you've ever been able to before. If you look at the revenue ramps of the top companies today, they're 4 times faster than they were 10 years ago. And the cost to start companies is, it is Moore's law. You can do about $1 10 years ago is about 10 cents today. So that's why you have a ton of these accelerators starting up. The question on the $2 million, most accelerators are not there for the capital. So you will have accelerators. I would say that the most accelerators are between $18,000 and $250,000 in terms of the capital you get. They then, in addition, might have affiliated programs or partners where you can get additional sources of capital, so there are channels through which you can get capital. But typically, the reason why you're doing an accelerator is not for the direct investment, but it's for the access to a larger pool of fundraising and to all the resources that you get, the community, the development, the mentors, and then the fundraising as well. The dilemma here is that it takes a lot less capital to start a company, but it still takes significant capital to build a significant company. If you look at most of the data, you're still needing about $25 million to get to sustainable cash flow positive, even though you can get to what used to be Series B milestones on a lot less. Yeah.
But, so sticking along on the same thing, what do people get, entrepreneurs get from going to an incubator versus what do they not get? Give me 3 examples for what do they get, what they don't get.
Okay, first you get your screen. There's a branding because you've been screened. Okay, so most accelerators have strong multiples of the applications that are coming into them, and so you are in the top 5% or the top 1% of all of the applicants. So instantly, by being accepted, it's a signal to any of the venture capitalists. 2 is that your valuation tends to get bid up, because when you're raising money in an institutional round, it's not about the average assessment of your company, it's the marginal term sheet that's going to drive the valuation. Your valuation is just how much capital you can convince a VC that you need, divided by the ownership percentage that they need. That's it. If you can say, I need $2 million, and the VC's willing to give up, wants it for 40%, or wants it for a third, your valuation's $6 million post. If they're willing to go down to 20%, your valuation is an $8 million post. So if you can drive the VCs to compete, your valuation goes up, and the accelerators create a structured vehicle to have people compete for you at the same time. The third is you get a community. You instantly join a network that is very difficult to get access to otherwise. And in fact, most of the accelerator communities are bigger than the VC communities by virtue of the number of companies that go through the accelerator. So it's actually a broader and bigger community than you can get access to. And then in addition, you have access to mentors, development, and then oftentimes accelerators have business development partnerships where they will get you strongly discounted rates on things that you would normally have to pay for. So, yeah.
Good. Let's get to the real mechanics, given the 2 minutes left.
Yes.
So for your, let's say from 18,000 that you talked about till 250,000.
Yeah.
What type of equity they have to give up for that?
It's
approximate ranges.
So, if you look at Y Combinator, I think it's $18,000 for 7%. That's and Y Combinator is probably the industry standard. If you, our accelerator it's typically around 4% for a $28,000 note. So I think the ranges are going to be, you're going to take in between, and then there are other accelerators that will give you more capital, but there'll be other trade-offs. So I think typically you're looking at a range between 3 and 8% for most accelerator programs, and you're going to be taking in between $18,000 and $50,000, and you need to value that against the additional capital that will come in by virtue of being associated with that accelerator and the value you think that you're going to get from the accelerator.
Good.
Yeah.
And you can count on him, so he might give you a better discount next time for you.
Yeah, he'll get you the TiE discount.
So again, one other question related to this is, you mentioned about 60 meetings an entrepreneur should go through it. How many incubators that he or she should talk to in the beginning at any point in time? Should he engage with 5, 10? What's the rule of thumb?
The best way to assess, there's a ton of accelerators and incubators out there right now. This is the same rule for when you're engaging with any investors, is what you want to do is you want to think about why you want to be in that program, and then talk to the people that you're trying to get to and see if they recommend it. So my general guidance on everything is that there's no decisions to be made until you have options. So you want to cast a wide net, show love to everybody, apply hard everywhere, and then when you get options, then have them compete, right? And then choose who you want. But barring that, if you're going into the accelerators to get funding, talk to the VCs that you want to get funded from and ask them which accelerators they love, or which angel investors they love, or which seed funds they love, and then prioritize those. And talk to the people who've graduated from those programs and get to understand if there's real value out of the incubators or the accelerators. You should do that with VCs, talk to the former CEOs that they backed, and you should do that with accelerators as well. Yeah.
One question that usually entrepreneurs have in their back of their mind is, when you talk to so many people, is there a loss of their ideas, or there's a people stealing their ideas? So what's the guidance you want to give on people, saying that how open they should be on their ideas, technology, and what they should not do?
Yeah, so you have to decide, you have to philosophically get comfortable with how much you're willing to share. And it depends on if it's a patent-driven type of company or if it's a non-patent-driven type of company. In my experience, the idea gets you 1 point. Typically, unless it's a hardcore innovation, 100 points is really given for execution on these companies, and you learn more by making yourself vulnerable. If you are worried about the idea, ways to get around that are to segment the idea out into different constituent parts and just reveal that one part to a person who's relevant in for that function of the idea without giving them the whole idea. That's one strategy around that. But in general, entrepreneurs are rewarded for making themselves vulnerable. The more vulnerable you make yourself, the more feedback you're going to learn, you're going to get, and ultimate differentiation comes on execution, not on the idea. Any market that you go into that is good will have competition, and competition is validation more than it is something that's threatening. It's validation that the market is big. The top 3 companies in any space will make money, so don't worry too much.
We're almost out of time, so I'll give you one final question to put a plug-in for your company. Okay. What differentiates Alchemist Accelerator, our incubator, versus other incubators?
Oh, thanks, Muddu. Okay, so the Alchemist Accelerator, you can just go onto the site, alchemistaccelerator.com. We are only focused, so our distinctions are, one, it's the first vehicle that any of those venture funds have actually backed, have created a platform around. Although they don't have there's no rights of first refusal that those guys get. We are only focused on companies that monetize from enterprises. So our whole focus are enterprise-focused startups. If you make money from enterprises, we're dedicated towards that. And we bring you customers. So we have in our accelerator, we have a ton of venture capitalists, and half of the companies have gotten funded from great funds like Greylock, Andreessen, Redpoint, funds besides the ones that have backed us. But as important as the VC in our accelerator are customers. We have a customer advisory board that's headed by Procter & Gamble and includes a whole bunch of awesome big corporates, and we drive a customer development. And we differentiate on quality. So all of the mentors are successful founders, all the VCs are diligenced and who get involved with you. So that's us.
Thank you, Ravi.
Thank you, guys.
Take care.
Yeah.
Ravi will be available outside for you guys to ask questions.
Okay.
Thank you, everyone.
Thanks.